Hi everyone, this is my onboarding Addie update and some of the recommendations I've chosen to adjust based upon what we've learned from the case study, and we'll hop right into it. The case study I've chosen is where I am the training manager for a large manufacturing plant with a large percentage of the 800 workers being line workers and then a small subset being supervisors and executives. The ask was that essentially the team is looking to add more diversity to the workforce, whether it's work persons from various physical disabilities. We're also looking to ensure that more women and minorities are within the workforce. The onboarding material has been shown to be a little skewed, it sounds like, and the shifts have been obvious that the onboarding material is no longer relevant and could be disorienting. So I've chosen this case study to make the updates as well as provide my view for how training for differences and or cultural competence can be applied for onboarding new employees. Within the analysis of this abbreviated Addie process and case study, we found that the audience is currently all incoming new hires, which includes about 70% of line workers and 30% of supervisors. The immediate ask from the case study is to essentially address the onboarding materials and make adjustments to old materials, add new, and probably also add an explanation of company policy basics as well. Within the training need, it's specific to onboarding, but with that, if you're training for a cultural competence and have noticed or plan to, add a shift in your employee population and what that diversity looks like, thought it could also be useful to roll it out to the larger group really as needed as well. So kind of kept that in mind, just how much this program or how much these changes could also be implemented to a larger group as well. The design of this training and the subsequent updates would depend largely upon how the training has traditionally been delivered and the format we're choosing to make updates to. If that format has historically been effective for the learners, and if not, maybe the method that would need to be addressed as well as what is most cost effective. For the purpose of this project, I'm just assuming that the learners will be using a self-directed method. I know quite a bit of onboarding materials can be that way, so that's just what I went with. This feels like a safer assumption because in a large company, I'm guessing new hire needs or backfills don't really happen all at the same time, so that it would have to be implemented in an as-needed basis for onboarding purposes. However, content updates could always be rolled out to the larger audience as well, just depending upon what's needed. Second, going into the design of the training would be the trends seen by onboarding in HR and cultural competence level of new hires. What have the learning gaps consistently been? What is typically being lacked within the population that's coming in, as well as the company demographic is consistent between two groups. Candidate profiles will likely be somewhat similar, meaning similar from points of knowledge and perspective. Now with that, again, similar doesn't mean it's safe to assume those connections. A basic starting point would be a safer bet. Assume learners either A, don't have any background for what you're talking about, which we will do as we don't have those details, or B, a simple overview or precursor to the course to ensure learners are refreshed in the material and have the content kind of top of mind before you jump in with both feet. Lastly, the design of the training edits and is the setting really, as an onboarding is given in an ad hoc basis. Unless you're hiring a class of employees at once, your audience could be one employee, it could be 3, it could be 10. Since this would be so dependent upon the business need, I'd recommend a self-directed e-learning course to be given as needed. That's a course based on the idea that how the onboarding material is currently given, but also could be altered slightly for whole group guided learning as well. For the development of training adjustments, I would suggest a presentation format that would be easy for self-directed learners to move at their own pace and understanding the material, but also for ease of access to revisit should they need. I would develop the training to start with probing questions, not only for the learner to gauge their current cultural competence, but also to understand the subject and prepare them to make those connections to their cultural experiences, as well as they work through the materials. Now, within adult learning theory, we've learned a couple of different theories and methods, but one that I touched on pretty heavily this semester was andragogy, which essentially says that adults come to the table with experiences and connections. So I think it's important, especially with a topic like cultural competence, to touch on someone's experiences, bring those top of mind, allow them to, air their grievances, understand maybe what gaps they have, so that way they're prepared to address those through the material. To follow, I would design the content, meaning add adjustments to the current content where needed, and implement new as well. This would solely depend upon what the work environment looks like now, taking into account current demographics and those of the new initiative, potential changes to the environment, i.e. if devices will be installed to support those with disabilities, and instructions for others maybe to how to assist someone in need of those devices, as well as materials or practices to ensure that employees understand how to respect other cultures, values, and attitudes within the workplace. So making sure that all of those aspects are really covered. In the development of the material, I would ensure that the visuals used throughout the training are relevant to the workplace and the audience. With that, if it's essentially what I mean is if it's a manufacturing company like we know, I would want to make sure the pictures within the PowerPoint weren't of a businessman in a boardroom, including relevant pictures of demographics and the work environment, so learners can easily draw those connections a little bit easier, and then immediately apply the material, as we know, which is, again, one of the more successful ways for adults to learn, and one of the ways that they look for those results within andragogy as well. Now, lastly, within the semester, we've learned how instrumental a debrief can be, not only for learners to understand the knowledge gained from, but also for the team to be able to see what updates are needed to the material and the methods that could best reach the learners to have a more successful program. So that would also be something I would implement, and really a large piece I would spend time on within the development of this training and these updates. The next phase of the Addie process, we have implementation, and with the implementation of this course would be adjustments made to the current material, whether that means new presentations from scratch or just simple adjustments. Just kind of depends where the current material stands. Ensuring all of the new material is covered to include policies or simple tips for being culturally competent within the workplace, or just meeting the company's specific expectations as well from employees, and ensuring that they're very clear on what those look like on such a subject. Also, I want to ensure that in the implementation, the evaluations, as this would be self-directed, will offer the learners the opportunity to understand what answers are correct in their evaluations. I would suggest that employees have a fillable worksheet as a part of the participant manual, and once they've completed the assessment, they're able to continue through the presentation to understand the correct answers, what they were, and kind of guide their understandings to, if any of their answers were incorrect, to be able to change those connections and ensure that they know what the correct actions would be within those evaluation questions. This would not only allow learners to gauge their own understanding, but also for the development team to see what items are consistently missed, and incorporate or alter the content to meet the learner needs. As a part of the participant manual, I would also include an employee agreement stating the company policy, procedures, or expectations of cultural awareness and competence to follow the completion of the training. I would do this to encourage the thought that it wasn't just a simple onboarding material to be cruised through, but an agreement to the company standards as well. As a part of the onboarding materials, I would also suggest beginning as soon as the material is developed and has stakeholder buy-in for the implementation, and rolling that out quickly. As a self-guided e-learning tool, it would have minimal associated costs other than time taken for the development and or to ensure new hires have access to the course. This could be done on company property, at a communal computer, or shared through shared content, provided that the employees return their evaluations back to the team. covers some of the principles of implementation covered in our text. The audience for this training will be all new hires and really any of the new hires within any role. However, a heavier concentration of line workers is likely. And the presentation of the material will follow the flow of a review of common connections or experiences to bring the material top of mind for learners and allow some room for connections to be made, followed by the content of the training in the form of a self-directed presentation. Third would be an evaluation in the form of scenario questions, followed up with a review of the answers and final review and debrief to ensure that learners have accomplished the objectives to meet the cultural competence expectations of the company. Lastly, the setting will be based within e-learning, so it can be given on an as-needed basis for orientation and new hire processes. The evaluation for this course would be both formative and summative. The scenario questions would be the formal assessment and evaluation for the course, and summative would be the conclusions that facilitators can draw from Likert scale answers given in the debrief that are going to be provided for the learners at the very end of the course, or like I mentioned, through that debrief section. As this will all be a part of onboarding material, my thoughts would be to keep it simple. This can be a very opinionated subject, so ensuring that learners are meeting company expectations with a very specific evaluation, as well as can provide and show their genuine reactions with a Likert scale will be the best way to evaluate without drawing the material out too long. This will allow for the team to assess the differences in the cultural competence, but also see any learning gaps and what's really needed to ensure that employees are meeting the mark.